Hello and welcome to The Public Good. This is Deja James from Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, which unites over 365 community organizations working to build a better Buffalo. We're delighted to join you every Tuesday morning at 10:30 a.m. on Power 96.5 FM and Mix 1080 a.m. You can also watch full video of every show on our YouTube page. Follow PPG Buffalo on Facebook and Instagram for more information on how to access video and the full podcast of our show. And of course, you can always get great information on our website, ppgbuffalo.org. I've done the spiel, so now to the guests. Today, we are joined by Steven Haagsma, Education Manager, and Cierra Fields, Content and Education Specialist with Housing Opportunities Made Equal. I'm really excited to have you both on the show because currently, as we know, there's many concurrent housing crises happening across the country, but especially in Western New York. And so I'm just very happy that you're here to join us to discuss some of the solutions that Home works on every day to these concurrent crises. But at first, I want you to both to just take a chance to introduce yourself to people, what you do, and just a little bit about yourselves.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. I'm Steven Haagsma. I'm the Education Manager, so I do fair housing trainings for tenants and landlords. So I let tenants know about their rights so that if a landlord isn't respecting their rights, they know that they can stand up for themselves and that they can come to us for help. And we also want to make sure that landlords who are trying to do the right thing know the information about the laws that govern the business they run to make sure that they're not, accidentally doing things they're not supposed to, so that we don't have to worry about enforcement with those well-meaning landlords and we can focus on the ones who are actually problems in the area.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I am Cierra Fields. I am the Education and Content Specialist for Home. I work alongside Steven in the education, and I also work the outreach events that we do and let people know about the services and resources available to them. And I also create the social media as well.
That's awesome. I want to kind of go back to something that you just mentioned, Steve, about the well-meaning landlords, right? Because I think, especially as I've joined PPG, I've learned a lot about homeownership and also landlordship that I just didn't know before. I think, the social media idea of a landlord is just kind of robber baron type of person that's has all these bags of money and is whatever, the developer or whatever. But a lot of, especially landlords in Buffalo, are just actually local people who maybe inherited a home that they're just using for income or different things like that. So what is the real landscape of, landlords in the area that you've had to navigate the relationships between tenant and landlord every day for?
Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of different kinds of people who are landlords. Yeah. And especially, Buffalo has so many doubles. And so if you want to achieve homeownership in Buffalo, you're most of the time going to end up accidentally being a landlord because you're going to rent out the other unit in your house.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of those. There are a lot of people who, they have their house. Maybe they rent out the other unit. Maybe they have one or two other properties.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the landlords in Buffalo. And those usually aren't the ones that we have lots of problems with.
Yep.
There are the bigger companies, I would say the big, more well-known property management companies.
Yep.
We run into issues with them sometimes, but they're usually not trying to break the law. There just are so many people who work for them that it happens because not everybody always knows all of the laws. They don't always know exactly what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But there are some people, some organizations that I don't want to ascribe malicious intent to them.
Of course.
But they don't try very hard to do things the right way.
Right.
To be informed or to do things the right way. They are trying to make as much money as they can without considering that these are people we're talking about and it's them having a roof over their head that we're talking about. And some landlords do a better job of remembering that than others, and some are just focused on the profit, which ends up being a big problem sometimes.
And I think that's the way homeownership is advertised, right? It's your path to generational wealth. It's seen as this kind of ticket into that next, getting yourself into middle class is becoming a homeowner, and potentially becoming a landlord is the supposed easy ticket to get yourself passive income. They love to talk about that. And so it becomes a system in which people are focusing on profit and not really realizing the full responsibility that comes with, I think, home ownership in general. I think a lot of people get into home ownership and don't understand what it really takes, and the full responsibility of that. And then also what housing rights are, or even the laws are, because to get a house and to get a second unit, there's no like required training. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no state required. You can just become a landlord and post it on Zillow, Craigslist, whatever, and now you're a landlord. And so how are you, I think Home is one of the organizations that are trying to combat that lack of knowledge with all of the workshops that you do have. And I want to give you some time, because not only do you have tenants' rights workshops and things for tenants, but as you said, you do have supports and resources for landlords as well, trying to bridge that gap of understanding and really the responsibility that they have. So I want to give you both a chance to talk a little bit about some of the programming you offer for landlords and tenants, both.
Yeah, so we have a landlord training that we offer via Zoom, because we realize that the landlords who are trying to do the right thing, it's not passive. They are busy. They are doing upkeep. They're doing maintenance. They're being responsive to their tenants. And so we want to make sure that it's accessible to them. So we offer it via webinar. We have an on-demand one that people can just watch, get the information whenever they have time to. We also have a monthly live webinar that we do. So we really want to make it accessible to landlords. We don't want to put more barriers. We offer it for free because we want to make the barrier to access for the information as low as possible, so that as many people choose to get that information and educate themselves as possible, so that the ones who are trying to do it the right way can continue to do that.
And would you recommend that course for someone who's like maybe thinking of becoming a landlord, so that they can learn kind of what the responsibilities are and what the resources are? Maybe they aren't a landlord yet, but they're thinking about going down that path.
Definitely. It's a big responsibility to be a landlord. And I don't want to minimize that, because, there are people who get into being a landlord and have no idea what it entails. It catches them by surprise. And so it's good to be prepared. It's good to know what you can and can't do, to know that if you do get into that business, it's not a my house, my rules kind of situation, because there are lots of rules that govern it, just like there are any other business. I always tell the landlords in the training that it's like being a coffee shop owner. You can't just make whatever rules you want. You can't ignore food safety regulations. You can't pick and choose who to serve and who not to serve. And the same basic principles apply basically no matter what kind of business you're running. And sometimes people forget that being a housing provider is a business, and every business has rules that they have to follow.
Yeah, there's literal state regulations, like you said, for even if you're running a restaurant or something, you have to follow certain regulations, that those apply to landlordship too. But the difference is there are trainings for people who are opening restaurants or something like that. And for landlords, there really is no state regulated place where they're centralizing the information of what housing rights are. So I think that's another reason why Home is such an amazing thing. You have a couple of other interesting programs that I want to ask about, but some of the ones you listed here that you talked about are also the tenants' rights workshops. So what are you teaching tenants for them to understand what their rights are going into rental relationships? Because I think a lot of the times folks feel like, oh, well, I'm just renting. This isn't my property, so there's not much I can do about, my bathroom's leaking. Somebody won't fix it, whatever. What are some of the things and steps that people can take if they're having trouble with their current rental unit?
Yeah, one of the things we focus on is teaching people about housing discrimination, letting them know who is protected from discrimination, because sometimes people might not realize that certain things are discrimination. They might think of discrimination just as racial discrimination or disability discrimination, which definitely happen, but they're not the only kinds of discrimination that happen, or the groups of people who are protected from it. So we want to make sure that people are able to recognize if discrimination happens to them. And then we also want them to know other things that landlords are required to do, as far as notice that they're required to give them for certain things, what fees landlords can and can't charge, and just basic things that people can recognize red flags or recognize if they're being taken advantage of in some way, so that they can stand up for themselves if those things happen.
And the fees are a huge thing because there are a lot of fees now. There's application fees, there's pet fees, there's like they're doing first, last, whatever, middle, whatever center. So how are you helping people navigate the fee structure? Because that's another huge barrier that I think even gets people to not even apply to an apartment in the first place. That I think is another form of discrimination in my personal opinion. But what are your opinions about the current fee structure that's going on nowadays?
Yeah, it's really important for people to know those things because it's not allowed for landlords to charge first, last, and security. They can only do first month's rent and security deposit. And they can't charge more than $20 for an application fee. And that fee can only go toward running a background check or a credit check. If those fees cost more than $20, the landlord has to pay whatever above $20 it is. And the landlord is also required to provide a copy of those reports to the applicant. And then that person can use those copies to provide them to other landlords if they're applying multiple places. And the landlord is required to waive the fee if someone can provide a copy of their own background report or credit report. So
wow. That's huge. I didn't even know that.
Right. Lots of people don't know that.
Yeah.
It was passed as state law in 2019.
Okay.
I actually didn't even realize it until last year when I reread the law. I was like, wait a second, I missed this.
Yeah.
I knew about the $20, but I didn't realize about the being required to provide the copy of the report. And it's a really big deal because it means if you're doing a housing search, if you don't get the first one, hopefully you can get the copies of those reports.
Yeah.
And then that's the only application fee you have to pay during a month-long period that you might be looking for housing.
No, that's saving people potentially hundreds of dollars. I mean, depending on how many properties you end up having to apply to.
And it might even save landlords money, too, if those checks are costing them more than the $20 that they're allowed to charge.
Absolutely. Because, I think certain landlords or property management companies, I know they use certain companies to do the background check that are charging more than that $20 limit and all of that. I understand that. But to know that people can provide that check if they've had it from somewhere else is amazing. And also that they need to be provided that because I've definitely personally applied to an apartment and nobody sent me anything from whatever check they did for me.
Tenants don't know it and landlords don't know it. So most of the time it's not just going to be given to somebody. That's why people need to know about it so that they can say, hey, you ran those checks. Can I have the copy? The state requires that you give them to me.
That's so interesting to me. There's so much a part of this process that people go through every day that these hiccups happen and we don't know. I mean, because the tenants, like you said, don't know and the landlords don't know. And so there's these things and infractions, I guess you would kind of say, against state law are just happening because nobody's aware of them. So I'm really glad you're here to talk about that. Another program that I'm interested in kind of highlighting really quick is that you kind of do this kind of rental investigator kind of program thing where you guys are sending investigators in to kind of apply for apartments and see how that process goes. What is that program like and how, I don't know, how did it come to be or how is it going? I mean, I think that's amazing. You actually hire people to be able to go and do that. So it's, it's a funding.
Yeah. Like Steven was saying, there's so many different ways or tactics, as we want to say, that housing discrimination actually exists. Yeah. So we send out, I'll think of it as a Secret Service investigation type thing.
Yeah.
Undercover agents.
Yeah.
We send people in, that way we can find out what's going on. And then they bring the results back to us and we investigate it and we, bring those wrongful landlords to justice. So it really is a great way for people to get firsthand knowledge of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And it's an education tool that we can use as well.
Yeah. And so when you're thinking about some of these landlords, is it something you're getting like a complaint from another client about a specific house or property or management company or whatever, and then you're like, okay, let's go and investigate what happened and what happens when you approach these people? So does that mean you're kind of taking complaints almost, or can people come to you with that?
Yeah. I mean, anything that people see online or that they hear about, we urge them to come and bring it to us.
Yeah.
So that we can take care of that.
Yeah.
So definitely do not be silent on that at all. Bring it to us so that we can help those landlords, get out.
Yeah.
And actually get, for those who are dealing with a landlord that they're not aware of, we can just help them get the justice that they need. Which is why we really just stress the importance of attending our landlord and tenant workshops as well.
Yeah.
Because the more people know, the more they can be informed, and that's really the best way we can educate.
No, that's really amazing.
And can I give an example
Of
there?
course,
So,
yeah.
if someone, for example, has a Section 8 voucher,
Yeah.
so they get help paying their rent with a voucher, sometimes landlords don't want to accept that, but
Yeah.
that's actually source of income discrimination under state law, and county law and city law.
Yeah,
but that's
all
a
of them.
different issue. So landlords aren't allowed to have a policy that they don't take Section 8 vouchers. So if someone comes to us and they say, hey, I tried to use my voucher here and the landlord said they don't accept it, then we'd send those testers in. One of them would say that they have a voucher, and the other one would have as many similar characteristics as we can get them to have with the person who brought the complaint,
Yeah.
but they would say they don't have a voucher. And then if the landlord treats those two people differently, we have evidence that, this housing provider is discriminating against people based on their source of income.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of a way to gather that information so that people who bring complaints to us don't need to have evidence. If someone has a text message where a landlord said exactly what they're doing, that makes our job easier, but they don't need that because we have this tool of sending those testers, those investigators.
Absolutely. So is it really just you're helping people kind of gather evidence? Is there kind of any legal support that you also give folks who maybe are having a current dispute, or maybe they're in eviction court or anything like that? Like, are there any legal supports that home also has to offer people who maybe are in a legal situation already?
Yeah, we provide paralegal counseling, so we don't directly represent people in court. If they need representation, usually we'll refer them to like neighborhood legal services.
Yeah.
We also work with the Civil Rights Clinic at UB Law School.
Yeah.
So we have different partners who can represent people, but we provide that kind of paralegal advice, letting people know, hey, this is what the law says.
Yeah.
These are the options you have available to you. Sometimes it might be like, this is the best way to try to communicate with your landlord to make sure they realize they are required to make this repair, that kind of thing. So we're going to always, make sure that people are aware of their rights and aware of whatever options they have available to them to deal with the situation that they're facing.
Right. So also just helping people understand their situation. If it needs to go a legal route, what do I do next type of situation as well.
Exactly.
That's amazing support that I don't think people know, is out there. I think people just kind of deal with things or like, oh, well, I just need to move out. I just never want to see or talk to this landlord again. And that's about it, and they cut their losses, or they don't get their security deposit back. And they're just like, oh, well, I'll just eat that couple $100,000 or $100 or a couple $1,000 and leave it at that. But I wanted to ask in terms of the housing discrimination piece, because your website has a really cool area where you talk about what really is housing discrimination outside of, like you said, disability or racial discrimination or things like that. And you had some phrases on there that I thought were really interesting that were like, when the landlord says to you, oh, well, you're really expensive to heat this place in the wintertime and, you don't want to live here, like trying to discourage you, those things of, oh, well, I don't think this is the best for you. And it seems like they're trying to be your friend. They're your buddy, right? Like, oh, I'm giving you some advice that, hey, maybe this isn't the best for you, but it's really, at the end of the day, deterring you for whatever personal reason that they have, which isn't really within their right to do. Like if you legally can, be a part of that property, then you should be. So I just wondering if you have any other kind of anecdotal stories about kind of, in disguise discrimination that people kind of really wouldn't think about when they're approaching kind of rental situations.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's definitely,
I just thought that was cool.
Landlords usually aren't going to tell you to your face that they're discriminating.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, of course.
Yeah, I mean, like those kinds of examples, that's called steering. So like trying to convince someone, oh, you don't want to be here. You should go somewhere else. But
Yeah.
It can also be like pushing them somewhere and saying like, hey, I've got another property over in this neighborhood. I think you'd like it more over there. Why is the landlord saying that? They don't know you. They don't know where you want to live. It's your choice where you want to look for housing.
Yeah.
You can ask a landlord if they have a place somewhere else.
Yeah.
If you want to live somewhere else.
Right.
But usually if you're looking, you want to live.
You wanted that apartment, right? You saw it, you wanted it.
And so, a landlord, if they're trying to convince you not to rent, something's up, because
Right.
landlords want to rent out their properties and get the rent back.
Right. Why not you? Yeah. That's really
It's
the base
definitely a
question
red
there.
flag anytime they're trying to convince you not to rent their apartment.
That's really interesting. 'Cause I just think it comes off as commonplace conversation. Like it's so sneaky that you think,
Right.
oh well,
You're like,
maybe
maybe
they're
it's not
right.
for me. Like,
Yeah.
maybe it's not really for me. Maybe he's right.
Then you're like, wait a second.
Exactly.
This
Yeah.
smells fishy.
Yeah, no, I mean that's really huge. It's just giving me things like I think I've experienced that, and you just don't know that, like it's really a cumbersome, tumultuous like process to try and find an apartment. And I personally just started renting and things after college about 5 or 6 years ago, and I thought it was gonna be way easier than it was, but it was way easier for me to get a student apartment with my refund check than it was after I was a person working and had my own money, and came back to the Western New York area. So I think that that's really very interesting. The other thing that I think all of these issues can lend themselves to is another crisis we're having is houselessness, right? Because people may or may not have a lot of barriers to entry to even get into an apartment, like the fee structure we're talking about that we've debunked already about how a lot of these fees or even the way they're charging first, last, and security aren't supposed to be happening. But people feel like they need a lot of base money to really get an apartment. And I think it leads a lot of people to couch surfing or different things that are part of the face of houselessness that I don't think a lot of people think about. I was listening to a different podcast earlier. I'm not going to plug another one, but about houselessness and the face of houselessness and what people think about when they think that. And you think of, maybe somebody with mental health issues, or you're thinking of someone that maybe has a drug problem or something like that can't keep stable income, can't keep stable employment, and therefore is facing houselessness. But this podcast that I was listening to was saying that like actually 1 in 16 people face houselessness in their lifetime, whether it be like I have to crash on a friend's couch because I can't afford such and such. And so I'm wondering, just out of the clients that you've seen facing kind of housing discrimination and other things, how you feel like these barriers and things you're fighting every day at home can lend itself to the houselessness problem, and how maybe if more people knew their rights and this landlord education that you're doing could maybe fix part of this major problem. Like, I'm just wondering what you've thought about houselessness and the connection to kind of all these barriers to renting and all of that.
Yeah, I think when people think about, someone with mental illness or substance use issues, like that tends to be more of the chronic side. And that is a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something we focus on as much. There are a lot of agencies that focus on that chronic homelessness or houselessness.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of other people who may face that problem for a period of time. If they get evicted, they may have the income to find a place, but it might take them 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks.
Right.
And so they're couch surfing or on the street or in a shelter for that time. Yeah. And if we can stop people from getting into that situation in the first place, that really helps, because it's a lot easier to keep a house that you already have than it is to find a new one.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure that people aren't wrongfully getting kicked out of the housing that they already have, and that they're not wrongfully prevented from obtaining new housing. And so that's where we're focused on. Whereas there are other organizations out there that focus more on people who are chronically on the streets or in shelters. But there are a lot of those people who might face houselessness for a couple of weeks at a time, but a couple of weeks is still a hugely traumatic experience.
Especially if you have children or other things like that. Yeah.
And if we can stop that from happening, that's a huge benefit to people if they can keep their housing situation stable over time.
And then just the other thing I'm wondering about too is for those people that maybe they're not even being evicted, but their housing situation is so poor that I just need to leave. Like the bathroom, there's lead in here, whatever. How are you helping people address maybe structural or kind of damage type issues in their current units, and like, maybe mediating that conversation they need to have with their landlord about some of the things that they need to do about repairs, or because there's a lot of like grants or different things for landlord rejuvenation that they've created and things that I don't necessarily know if all landlords know about. So I don't know if that's a part of your landlord education course, but how are you helping people that maybe are in units that maybe aren't up to a certain standard?
Yeah, we always want to make sure that people know that their landlord is supposed to make repairs, because sometimes landlords can try to pass it off like, oh, you just got to deal with that for a while. Like I'll get to it later, or I'll make that repair if you give me $200 extra or something like that. But that's not, being a landlord, part of the responsibility is making sure that tenants have a habitable place to live. And so we want to make sure that people understand that. And we also encourage people, if they have to make requests for repairs, to always put it in writing, because that way, if there ends up being a dispute or an issue, there's a paper trail. It's not just your word against the landlord's. If it comes to an issue where you may need to take them to small claims court to try to get some kind of damages. But it's really important for people to understand that they're not asking the landlord for a favor.
Yeah.
They're asking the landlord to do their job.
Right.
So we do want to make sure people know that. We will communicate with the landlord if necessary. Make sure the landlord realizes that it's their job. And sometimes landlords, if you let them know, like you said, that there are financial resources out there for them, like if it is an issue of financial resources, sometimes it is, that might help. Sometimes that's not the issue, and then we may need to pass things on to one of our legal partners. But we'll definitely take multiple angles at a problem with a client who needs those repairs made or other similar issues.
Well, that's awesome, Risa. Sorry, we're reaching the end. And so I want to ask how people can get in touch with you all if they're having, an issue or they think that they face discrimination or anything like that. Like, how best can people contact you or get your services so listeners know?
Okay, so we are located at 1542 Main Street, across from Willoughby Insurance. You can reach us on Facebook, which is at Home Inc., or on Instagram at home.org, basically ORG.
Yeah.
Or you can email us as well at info@homeny.org. I'm sorry. Yes, it is. Or call us at 716-854-1400. Again, that's 716-854-1400.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for being here and helping people know what their housing rights are, whether they are landlord or tenant. And hopefully we can create a better housing experience for everyone in Western New York. So thank you so much for the work you do every day. This is Deja James with Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, uniting over 365 organizations working to build a better Buffalo. It's the Public Good, Tuesdays at 10:30 a.m. on Power 96.5 FM and Mix 1080 a.m.